And this is where Jesus is talking about. When you pray, don't pray like the hypocrites do. Prayer that focuses on me and mine is always hypocritical. When we can become convinced that by performing certain religious activities we draw the favor of God, we're in trouble. Because I can't do anything to make God love me any more than He already does. He gives us some clues here. He says, for they love to stand and pray. And when we think about praying, we usually think about, the New Testament ideal is bowing before God and kneeling before God. But to the Jew, it was the common position for prayer. Because they would go to the synagogue and there were no seats, they would stand and they would pray. Some would look to heaven, some people raise their hands to pray, others bow their head. And Jesus is saying, it's not the position of your body that's important. It's the position of your heart. That's what the important thing is. He says that they love to pray in synagogues. Well, that was the most appropriate place to pray publicly. There's nothing wrong with public prayers. We have public prayers here in church. I pray, trustees pray, deacons pray. Sometimes you're called on to pray publicly on Wednesday nights. Ask the blessing on the offering. All of those things. It's the appropriate place to pray. We see public prayers throughout the New Testament. Again, it's not the place. Position of your heart when you pray. He says, they love to pray on street corners. As we said before, devout Jews would stop and pray at the prescribed time. It's interesting. Go back to Matthew chapter 6. It says in verse 2 of Matthew 6, therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound the trumpet before thee as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. And that word streets there in verse number 2 is a Greek word that means the narrow way. The narrow street. You say, why would they give on the narrow street? Because when they blew the trumpets for their giving, boy, it would echo off the buildings and everybody would be called attention to it. But when he gets over to chapter 5 and he says they love to pray in the corners of the streets, the word that he uses there is the word that means the wide way or the broad way. Why would he use that word? Because they love to pray where all the people could hear them. They wanted to be seen of men. Pray that way. But the real evil that Jesus says is that they wanted to be seen of men. They prayed with pride in their heart. It is not wrong to pray in church. It is not wrong to pray in your car. It's not wrong to pray on the street corners. But make sure that your motive is always right. Sin always begins in the heart. And pride, the sin of pride, is always to exalt ourselves. Prayer is so important to our spiritual walk and our spiritual life. But it's important that we pray correctly. that we pray with the right attitude and the right motives. Jesus is going to tell us how to pray. Don't pray like them. He's going to tell us next week. Pray this way. Pray this way. Let's bow for prayer.